Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is William Miller, and I will be moderating our call this morning. Far too often, too many in our state have faced the awful effects of gun violence. We are joined today by organizations, individuals, and elected leaders who are committed to ending this epidemic by tackling the root of the problem by banning military-grade assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. On the call today to discuss new legislation filed for this upcoming session that would do exactly that are the gun reform group Ban Assault Weapons Now, the League of Women Voters Florida, the Florida Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence, Change the Ref, and March for Our Lives Florida. We are also joined by elected leaders State Senator Gary Farmer, representing Senate District 34, along with State Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith, representing House District 49, to discuss their bills. We will hear from the first 5 of our speakers today, followed by time for questions from members of the media, and then continue with our final 2 speakers. If you have any questions for our panelists, please type 1 in the chat. I will now pass the mic to Gail Schwartz, the chair of Ban Assault Weapons Now, whose nephew, Alex Schachter, was one of the victims in the Parkland shooting.
Thank you, everyone, for joining this morning. It's been 3 years since my nephew, Alex, was shot and killed by an AR-15 while sitting at his desk in language arts class. Alex was a great kid. All he wanted to do was play the trombone in the school marching band and play basketball with his team and hang out with his family and friends. But all of that was abruptly ended when a killer went on a shooting rampage in his Parkland high school. And he was able to do it fairly easily because he had a weapon with large capacity magazines designed to kill as many people as quickly as possible that fires at 3 times the force of a handgun. In the first 1 minute and 44 seconds, the killer was able to shoot 24 people on the 1st and 2nd floor of the high school. And then he went up to the 3rd floor, and in 1 minute and 5 seconds, he was able to shoot 10 more people. And this is all while our kids are running for their lives, being chased like enemies on a battlefield. There is no justification for a civilian owning weapons designed for war. As long as killers can purchase weapons designed for mass carnage, our loved ones will never be safe. That's why Senate Bill 370 and House Bill 653, filed by Senator Farmer and Representative Smith, will save lives. We didn't do it after the Pulse nightclub shooting, when 49 of our fellow Floridians were slaughtered. We didn't do it after Parkland, when our kids and our educators, 17, were slaughtered. But we must do it now. 7 states and the District of Columbia already ban assault weapons. 9 states and the District of Columbia already ban large capacity magazines, and we can do it here in Florida too. I am imploring every Florida legislator that cares about saving lives and preventing the next mass shooting to please co-sponsor these life-saving bills. Together, we can save lives and we can get this done. Thank you. I'll hand it back over to Will, our moderator now.
Thank you so much, Gail, for your powerful words. Speaking next is State Senator Gary Farmer, representing Senate District 34, and one of the sponsors of legislation this session that would ban military-grade weapons and high-capacity magazines.
Thank you, William. And it's hard to follow those moving words by Gail. Like Gail, I had a personal connection to Parkland. I lived there for 10 years and had just moved from Parkland when the shooting occurred. As we approach the Valentine's Day holiday, it will never be the same for me. Not after touring that Stoneman Douglas campus and seeing the cards and the flowers strewn around the hallways from the students that fled in terror as Nicholas Cruz unleashed shot after shot after shot after shot after shot, and inflicted such horrific carnage on the students and teachers and others who died that day. We have a gun problem in the United States. We have a gun obsession in the United States. No other country has the numbers of mass shootings that we have. And whether it's Parkland or Pulse or Aurora, Colorado, or Newtown or Las Vegas or any of the other of the myriad of mass shootings we've had, the circumstances have differed in all those shootings. Mental health was probably an issue in almost all of them. Sometimes there were prior signs, sometimes there weren't. But the single common denominator of every one of those shootings was the weapon used itself, the assault weapon and the high capacity magazine. As Gail said, Nicholas was allowed to shoot, was able to shoot hundreds of rounds in less than 2 minutes because he had high capacity magazines and because he had an assault weapon. And when you look at these weapons, when you look at the manufacturer specifications of these weapons, they were designed for one thing and one thing only: to kill large numbers of human beings in the briefest time span possible. That's it. There is no sporting purpose to have an AR assault weapon. It's not sporting to hunt a deer with one. You don't need an assault weapon to defend your home. If Nicholas Cruz had just had to reload more often, fewer people would be dead today. And so, yes, Representative Smith and I call on our colleagues to make this a bipartisan issue, to join with us in joining the other states that have banned assault weapons. We once had a federal ban on these weapons. We need to ban assault weapons. We need to make it harder for those intent on inflicting carnage to do so. Only by banning assault weapons and high capacity magazines can we begin to level the playing field, and no private person should have the type of weaponry that our armed forces or that our law enforcement possess. We saw just a few weeks ago in our nation's capital how dangerously precarious that thought is. And so I'm very grateful for the support of the people and everybody associated with Ban Assault Weapons Now. My heart goes out to Gail and to Manuel and to all the family members who are approaching a holiday that will never, ever be the same, a holiday that's supposed to be one of love and now is one of sorrow and death for so many. The time has come to ban assault weapons in the state of Florida. We should do so to protect future generations so that such tragedies do not happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Farmer. Up next to speak is State Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith, who represents House District 49, which includes the Pulse nightclub. He has also sponsored legislation this session to ban assault-style weapons and high-capacity magazines.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Senator Farmer, and thank you to everyone who is joining us for this very important and very somber conversation. I'm Carlos Guillermo Smith. I represent House District number 49, East Orlando, which is actually just outside of the district where Pulse nightclub sits, which of course is a very sober sight in Central Florida for so many of us. This is the 5th year in a row that we are sponsoring this legislation to ban military-style assault weapons and large-capacity magazines. And we're doing this to protect our communities. We're doing it to protect our friends, to protect our families. When you look at the individuals who are joining us here today on this call, we are reminded of how important this work is to make sure that military-grade weapons don't fall into the hands of civilians. I'm joined by my good friend who you'll hear from in a little bit, Brandon Wolf, himself a survivor of the Pulse nightclub shooting. Since that terrible day, not a single day has really passed not a single day has passed that I have not thought of the 49 who were taken at Pulse nightclub. Certainly, we continue to wear the Pulse ribbon, and I wear it every day to keep myself grounded in how important it is for us to protect our communities from gun violence. And I was wearing this ribbon on the same day that we heard the terrible news while we were doing work here in Tallahassee on the floor of the Florida House of Representatives, and we heard the terrible news coming out from Parkland. And of course, my paths crossed with Manuel and his wife. Not too long after that, they lost their son, Joaquin. He was taken in the Parkland shooting, but our paths crossed not too long after that in Orlando, where these two communities, Parkland and Pulse, came together in solidarity with one another and in grief, but also in a commitment to a common cause to change the law, to prohibit these types of weapons from having unfettered civilian access. In Orlando, this individual was radicalized online, but he was also empowered by state and federal law that allowed for civilian access to these weapons of war. That's what we're trying to change. And I'm proud to stand with this group again this year. Gail, I'm proud to stand with you in memory of your nephew, Alex, and so many others. I'm proud to stand with the March for Our Lives students and know that we're not just doing this in vain, but that we're doing this to honor them with action and prevent future communities from ever having to go through this ever again. So thank you all for joining us. And I urge members of the Florida House, both Republican and Democrat, to please co-sponsor House Bill 653 so that we can finally ban military-style assault weapons and large capacity magazines. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Smith. Next to speak is Manuel Oliver, who lost his son Joaquin in the Parkland shooting and is the founder of Change the Rough.
Hello, everyone. I lost my son and best friend, and I always say that they call it anniversary. I think there's a happy connotation next to the word anniversary, so I don't like using that word. I think it's just 30 years of the worst day of our lives. When Gail called me, I thought that was this was a great movement. There was no reason for not promoting this and push it forward. Finally, someone was bringing me the thought that this is not only happening in schools, it's everywhere. That's the way that I think too. It happened to Joaquin inside a school, but it's all around, right? We're not safe. It's a little ironic that, and Brandon, I think I told you this, Joaquin had a conversation with me about the Orlando shooting. And he was very concerned about the future of the nation by keeping these easy laws that will give access of guns and, of course, assault weapons to civilians. And then Joaquin ended up being dead, shot 4 times with an AR-15. Gail also said today that we didn't do it after Orlando. We didn't do it after Vegas. We didn't do it after Parkland. And I'm asking myself, why do we have to do it after? Why don't we do it before? So what else do we need to do? What else does it need to happen? So everybody realizes that this makes perfect sense. I haven't been in a debate with a gun owner that actually holds an AR-15, and he uses the argument that this is for self-defense. It is not. We all know that it's not. It's about killing people in the least amount of time. This is a problem that not other nation has. Honestly, the way that we deal with it, you don't see it anywhere else. The fact that we are trying to convince people that fewer victims, not that anyone will die. Like, our argument is that if you don't have that weapon but another one, then you will find fewer victims. It's bizarre. We are trying to save a few lives. Now, one of those lives could be your son and best friend, or it could be yourself. So suddenly I'm in a discussion that wouldn't make any sense in many other first world nations. I thought that what happened on January 6th will be also part of a great argument for us, but it wasn't. So we live in a society that decided to give easy access of assault weapons to criminals. Yes, and also to non-criminals. But you never know. No one goes, hey, I'm a criminal, I want an AR-15. Nobody buys a gun that way. Criminals turn into criminals. The good guy with the gun becomes a bad guy with the gun. Like that, in a minute, after a regular debate or a bad moment. So that's the reality. And if you don't get it that way, I really don't know what else to do. One thing that we did is that we placed a huge billboard with Joaquin's face in the city of Boston, Massachusetts. You can't buy an assault weapon in Boston, Massachusetts. And we had a message from Joaquin. If I had attended high school in Massachusetts instead of Parkland, Florida, I would likely be alive today. Gun laws save lives. And what happened after that is that some of the Parkland family were very offended. And that if that's what is offending you and not the fact that someone came into a school and killed 17 people, then we have a problem. Just to finish this, I didn't start this fight. I regret not being involved before when I had that conversation with Joaquin about Orlando. That's the day that I should get out there and start painting murals all around the nation. That's the only thing that I regret. But it won't happen again. I didn't start this fight, but I'm going to fight it back pretty hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. Speaking next is Brandon Wolf, a survivor of the Pulse nightclub shooting and a gun safety advocate.
Thank you, Will, and thank you, Manny, always for your powerful words. It's been almost 5 years since the shooting at Pulse, and by now my story and the stories of this community have been very well documented. You've heard about the mothers burying their children, caskets ordered decades too soon. You've heard about the scores of injured, some bound to wheelchairs and walkers to this day. But today, I wanted to tell you a part of my story that I've not shared publicly before. I first looked at the autopsy reports for my best friends, Drew and Juan, on my birthday in 2016. Truthfully, I don't know what I hoped to find in there. Closure, answers. I told myself that somewhere in those documents was the assurance I needed that they didn't suffer in their last moments on Earth. But I was not prepared for what was on the pages. Juan suffered 10 gunshot wounds that night, 2 in the torso, 2 in the arm, 6 in the leg. He was rescued from the club, carried out on a stretcher, rushed to a hospital, but died in surgery. Doctors unable to save him from his injuries. Drew took 9 more bullets. The list of his perforated organs was almost too long to recount. He never made it off the dance floor. You see, my best friends were not just shot and killed, they were brutalized. Their bodies were reduced to target practice by a man armed with a weapon designed for a battlefield, a weapon he bought legally. Drew and Juan's were just 2 of the 49 autopsy reports produced at Pulse. 49 outlines of human bodies on pages with dozens and dozens of gunshot wounds scribbled over the top. It has been almost 5 years, and all I can think about is their bodies on the floor riddled with bullets, and ask myself, when? When is enough enough? When do we demand an end to the militarization of hate in our state and our country? When do we take a look around and decide that the survival of our communities is worth more than our obsession with easy access to weapons of war? We have seen progress, witnessed steps, but when do we finally take action? This bill is what action looks like. The efforts of Senator Farmer and Rep. Smith and all those who co-sign this bill is what action looks like. It is beyond time that Floridians be able to send their children to school without fearing they're going to come home in body bags. It is beyond time that our communities be allowed to thrive without the threat of war erupting on the produce aisle. It is beyond time that we honor those 49 victims from Pulse, those 17 victims from Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, not just cartoon outlines of human bodies on a page, but people with lives stolen from them. It is beyond time that we honor them with a future where no one has to experience the hell they went through. It is time for our lawmakers to do what is right. It has been almost 5 years, and it is time to ban assault weapons and large capacity magazines in Florida. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon, for your powerful testimony. Now we will briefly open up for questions from members of the media. Again, if you have a question, please type in 1 into the chat now. Then you'll be unmuted, and then please give your name, media outlet, and your question. Thank you. All right, I'll give another moment for any questions from members of the media. All right, we do have a question from Mitch Perry from, I believe, Spectrum News 13. Mitch, could you unmute yourself?
Yeah. Hi there, William. Actually, Spectrum Bay News 9 in Tampa. So a question to Representative Smith. Rep, you mentioned the fact, I think this is the 5th time that you proposed this bill in the House. Any thoughts about it getting a little more traction than it has in the past?
Thank you, Mitch. 2021, we are off to a fresh start We have brand new Republican and Democratic members of the Florida House and the Florida Senate. And what was also alluded to by folks on this call was that in addition to the Florida mass shootings that we have experienced and seen, in addition to the other acts of violence and mass shootings that we have seen in other parts of the country, that on January 6th, we also saw armed insurrection at the Capitol building in DC, which included these types of weapons of war, which had they been used, had the insurrectionists got further, could have contributed to another type of mass slaughter that this country has never seen before, at least in a government building. I think that should be a wake-up call to folks that action is necessary. And to what Manuel said earlier, I just want to echo that we shouldn't wait for another act of violence for there to be action taken. We can prevent more innocent lives being lost by passing this legislation now.
Thank you, Mitch, for your question. Do we have any other questions from members of the media? All right, we will move on. Our next speaker is Zoe Weissman, the Deputy Policy Director and Parkland Lead for March for Our Lives in Florida.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Zoe, and I'm a student at a high school right here in Florida. I'm only 15 years old, almost 16. I know, I'm young. However, I'm also the Deputy Policy Director for March for Our Lives Florida. For almost 3 years, I've dedicated my time to ending the gun violence epidemic that has taken the lives of so many of our family members, friends, and neighbors. But I had no choice but to become an organizer. I'm here besides others like Ms. Schwartz, here today who came together after Parkland. For me, the story begins cowering under a table in my old middle school, where on February 14th, just next door, 17 of our neighbors, friends, teachers, coaches, and classmates were murdered. It started outside at a picnic table for me, where gunshots ran through my ears and a deluge of ambulances flowed through the streets. I distinctly remember the pounding of my feet on the concrete and the beating of my heart as I dashed to the office in fear of death. I was only 12 years old. After the shooting, I developed post-traumatic stress disorder. I can't watch fireworks or hear loud noises without traveling back to that fateful day on Valentine's Day, which we're coming up to the 3-year mark. Instead of letting my pain and suffering consume me, I turned to activism and joined the movement that has already shaped the political landscape of our home state of Florida. I'm old enough to know that it shouldn't be this way, and I'm only 15. I should be worrying about planning my next birthday party. Instead, I am here testifying once again, year after year, to call to ban the gun that has murdered not only 17 people in Parkland, not only 49 people in Pulse, Newtown, Sutherland Springs, Las Vegas, Aurora, San Bernardino, in our homes, airports, churches, concerts, daycares, hospitals, nightclubs, newsrooms, synagogues, high schools, military bases, street corners, movie theaters, political rallies, colleges, video game tournaments, and malls. Enough is enough. We are ready to come back here year after year because we know that history is on our side and the tides are turning. We know that Floridians can see through the lies that this legislator has sold to us cycle after cycle. And to those politicians who still decide to value profit over human lives, your ship is sinking. The NRA has filed for bankruptcy. A legal battle like no other is heading their way from the New York Attorney General. Marion Hammer is corrupt. The hands of the NRA in Tallahassee are loosening after years and years of efforts of people power and organizers and activists and survivors like myself. I'm here not just to call for support for this bill, but to support me, support my family, my neighbors, and my generation. End the gun violence epidemic and pass the damn bill. Thank you.
Zoe, thank you so much for being here today and for your very powerful testimony. Our final speaker today is Patricia Brigham, President of the League of Women Voters Florida and a representative for the Florida Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence.
Thank you. In summation, on this, the 8th day of February 2021, we find ourselves once again calling upon our Florida legislature to ban semi-automatic assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. 3 years after the horrific mass shooting at the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, and nearly 5 years after the terrible night of the massacre at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. We continue to call on our lawmakers to do the right thing and prevent more unnecessary bloodshed. Many thanks to Gail Schwartz, Hero, and BAWN for their courageous fight to put forward a citizen initiative to ban assault weapons. Thank you to the members of the Florida Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence that the Campaign to Keep Guns Off Campus and the League of Women Voters of Florida formed in the days after the Pulse mass shooting. And to our ever loyal sponsors, Senator Gary Farmer and Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith. Thank you. I'm not going to restate what the speakers before me have already so eloquently said, except for this: for anyone who believes you are immune from gun violence, I implore you to listen to the grieving family members and survivors here today. Their cries for justice have too long been ignored. Preventing gun violence should not be a political battle or a partisan battle. This is a public safety issue. We need to be free to walk the streets, attend school, enjoy a night out, free from the fear of being gunned down. We call upon our legislature once again, and will continue to do so until our lawmakers not only hear the bills, but pass them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia. And before we end, we also have an additional comment from Manuel Oliver. Manny, you can speak.
Sure. I have a little concern here. You heard Gail and her story, losing her beautiful nephew. You heard how I told you that I lost my best friend, beautiful son, Joaquin Oliver. Brandon lost his best friends, multiple shots, a lot of suffering. You heard leaders from our state. You heard a 15-year-old girl talking about how she feels today, 3 years later. We are less than a week away from the day that marks the 3rd year since I lost my son. And you don't have any question? Like the local media from Florida has no questions? You might have kids and you live in Florida. Maybe, yes, you don't have any question, but I have something that I need to share with you. Look in this mirror. Look at our faces. Let everybody know that you were in this press conference. You heard us and you had no questions because everything seems so clear. I wish I was on your side. I wish I would make the questions and not give the answers. This is a team work. And we need you to support this because it makes perfect sense for all of you to feel that your kids are safe. as a feeling that I won't enjoy anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. Thank you all for being here today, to our legislators for putting forward this much needed legislation, and for all of our speakers for their brave and powerful testimony. If you do have any further questions, please feel free to send me a message or our speakers with your question and to set up a follow-up interview. I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.